Some things are buried. This one was drowned. There is a difference. When you bury something, the earth closes over it and it is gone. When you drown something, it is still there, whole, waiting. Just beneath the surface you can see your own face in, and every so often the people who live nearby will tell you it finds a way to make itself heard. High in the mountains of northern Italy, where the border brushes up against Austria and Switzerland, there is a lake called Rieschen. It looks like a postcard. Cold, glassy, an unreal shade of jade, cradled in a bowl of snow-covered peaks. And then you notice the one thing that should not be there. Rising straight out of the open water, far from any shore, with no island beneath it and no land around it, is the stone bell tower of a medieval church. Just the tower. Standing alone in the middle of the lake, as though an entire church had been lowered into the water and swallowed up to the neck. Tourists photograph it by the thousand. It is one of the most surreal sights in all of Europe. And almost none of the people taking those pictures know what they are truly looking at, because that tower is a headstone, and the grave beneath it is an entire village. Its name was Graun, in Italian Curon, and it was a real place for 600 years. Picture a high alpine valley, a few hundred people, farmhouses of wood and stone gathered around a church, cattle in the summer meadows, rye and potatoes coaxed out of the thin mountain soil, a school, an inn, a churchyard where the same families had been laid to rest side by side for 24 generations, and at the heart of all of it, the Church of St. Catherine, built around the year 1357, its bells marking every hour, every mass, every wedding, and every funeral in that valley for 6 full centuries. This was not a grand place, it was an ordinary one, which is exactly what makes what happened to it so hard to forgive. Because to understand how an entire village ends up at the bottom of a lake, you first have to understand who was living in it, and why so few people were willing to fight for them. For most of its history, this valley was not Italian, it was Tyrolean, Austrian, German-speaking to its bones. The people of Graun spoke German, prayed in German, taught their children in German, and then the First World War ended. The map of Europe was carved apart, and in 1919 the whole of South Tyrol was handed over to Italy. The people did not move, the border moved over them. In a single stroke, without ever leaving their own kitchens, they became a foreign minority inside a country that had just acquired them. And when Mussolini's fascists came to power, being German here became something close to a crime. Their language was banned from the schools. Their family names were forcibly rewritten into Italian. An entire culture was told officially to vanish. So when the plans came for the valley itself to vanish, there was almost no one left willing to listen to the objections of a few hundred German-speaking farmers, in a place most of Italy had never even heard of. The plan was simple, and it was about money. 2 small natural lakes already lay in the valley. Build a dam at the low end, and you could merge them, raise the water dozens of meters, and create a vast reservoir to spin turbines and generate electricity, power that would be sold and burned far, far away from Graun. The price was only the valley, the farms, the fields, the village, all of it, underwater. And the people of Graun fought it, not for a year, for the better part of 30 years. They protested, they petitioned, they organized, they wrote to officials who never wrote back. They understood with total clarity what was being asked of them, to hand over their homes, their land, and the graves of their parents to be drowned so that a company could sell electricity somewhere else. And in their desperation, they appealed all the way to the Vatican. They begged the Pope himself to step in. Nothing stopped it. The Second World War slowed the work, but it did not cancel it. And in 1950, the dam was finished, and the order finally came down. The valley was condemned. They were given almost no time. Around 900 people were told to leave the only homes their families had ever known. More than 150 houses were emptied and then destroyed, dynamited flat deliberately so that no beams or roofs would tear loose and float to the surface once the water rose. The people carried out what they could hold, and then they climbed to the high ground, and they stood, and they watched the water climb the walls of the church, watched it swallow the streets they had walked their entire lives, watched it close over the rooftops, the gardens, the graveyard, the fields, rising and not stopping, until the surface of a brand new lake lay flat and calm and mirror still over the exact place where a whole world had been standing that very morning. Everything went under, everything but one thing. The bell tower of St. Catherine's. Because it was 600 years old, it had been listed as a protected historic monument, and so, in a final and strange mercy, it alone was permitted to remain. The village drowned around it, and when the water at last went still, the tower stood there by itself, up to its neck in the lake, the single surviving finger of a buried world pointing at the sky. That is what the tourists photograph. A grave marker for a village almost no one remembers, in a lake that did not exist within living memory. But the tower is not the strangest part of this story. The strangest part is what people say still comes out of it. Before the flood, the bells were taken down. Of course they were. They were valuable and they were sacred, and there was no sense in drowning them. They were lifted out of the tower and carried away, and the tower was sealed, empty and silent, long before the water ever touched it. The bells of Graun have not hung in that tower for more than 70 years. And yet, ask the people who live along the shore of Lake Rishon, and some of them will lower their voices and tell you that on the coldest, stillest nights of winter, you can hear them. The bells, ringing, out on the lake from beneath the ice. A slow, faint, unmistakable tolling, drifting across the frozen water from a tower that has nothing left inside it to ring. It cannot be happening. The bells are gone. This is documented and certain and beyond dispute, and still the story refuses to die, passed down and repeated year after year, because too many people, standing on that shoreline on too many freezing nights, have heard a sound that has no source. And then there is the thing that is not a legend at all, the thing that is simply, verifiably true and somehow more unsettling than any ghost story. In the deep of winter, Lake Rishon freezes solid. The ice grows thick enough to carry the weight of a grown adult, and when it does, people walk out onto it, out across the lake all the way to the tower, where they lay their hands on stone that was carved 600 years ago. Stop for a moment and think about where they are standing. They are standing on a lake, and directly beneath their boots, under the ice, under 20 meters of black and silent water, is the village. The streets are still down there, the foundations, the churchyard, everything the water took held in the dark exactly where it was left, and people stroll across the top of it on a bright winter afternoon out to the one thing that refused to go down. The story did not stay in that valley. It could not. It was too strange and too sad and far too heavy to keep quiet. In time it spread across Italy and beyond, becoming a best-selling novel told in the voice of a woman from the drowned village, and later a television series watched around the world. An entire country staring at that lonely tower in the water, finally asking the question the people of Graun had been screaming for 30 years. How was this allowed to happen, and who exactly was it done to? So stand there, on the shore, or out on the ice, in front of that tower, on a cold and windless night, and listen. Maybe what you hear is only the wind, moving through a hollow stone shaft, playing on the imagination of people who want, very badly, to believe. Maybe the bells are simply a kinder story than the real one, that a village can be erased so completely that all it leaves behind is a rumor and a rooftop, or maybe a place taken this violently from people who fought this hard does not simply stop existing because the water above it runs deep. Maybe the bells that were carried away still ring somewhere the living cannot follow, for a congregation that was ordered to leave, and in every way that truly matters, never did. The tower is still standing. You could go and see it tomorrow. A church at the bottom of a lake with only its head above the surface, in a valley that was drowned on purpose, over a village that 900 people were forced to abandon and were never once allowed to return to. And on the right kind of night, if the wind comes down off the mountains just so, stop and listen, because the people who live there will tell you quietly that the bells of Graun are not finished ringing. They have only moved somewhere farther away than the living are ever meant to go.